Robert Foley, and this is another episode of Startup Monthly. We have a very special episode this month where we have Jevon MacDonald from Go Instant in Nova Scotia and Gerry from New Brunswick. And along, as usual, we have Sahim Asamad. How you doing? Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, Robert.
Hey. So what I'm going to do first is just get Gerry and Jevon to introduce themselves. So Jevon, if you can introduce yourself, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Jevon MacDonald. I'm co-founder and now GM of GoInstant.com, and we're a Halifax-based company that was acquired by Salesforce about a year ago. And I'm also co-founder of StartupNorth.ca, a blog about Canadian startup community, and co-founder of Volta Labs, which is a Halifax-based co-working space for startups.
Great. Gerry, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
I can. I'm Gerry Pond. I bill myself as a seniorpreneur, which means that I'm still an entrepreneur, but I am eligible for Canada Pension. And I do take a little slice of that, but I have to give it back because I've got too much money, I guess. So I've been involved with startups for the last 10 years and currently involved with one I find pretty exciting called East Valley Ventures. And I'll talk a little bit more about that perhaps during your show, but I've been involved with a number of startups as a co-founder, as an angel, as a whatever, and I hang out with startup people.
Excellent. Well, thank you for hanging out with us on this Google Hangout. So I guess the first topic that we're going to talk about is a couple years ago, the startup scene was really just kind of like starting and whatnot, but then we had two major exits. We had the Q1 Labs exit, we had the Radiant 6 exit, and then we had another exit, which was Go Instant, which was with you, Jevon. So with all this newfound energy that has happened with the startup scene, we've had a lot more people joining startups, a lot more people getting involved and becoming entrepreneurs. But a lot of people now have got, their first round of funding, they've built a prototype. What's the next step that they need to take to make them a huge success? And I'll have to start with you, Jevon.
I think the biggest thing I'm seeing, and I don't think this is specific to Atlantic Canada, but it's something that's definitely been on my mind lately. It's just, I see a lot of entrepreneurs with great product ideas, but who aren't really thinking about the impact what they're doing could have kind of globally. I'm seeing a lot of entrepreneurs really getting stuck on where their business is going to be able to scale and have a real impact, and it's tough when you're looking at them either as an advisor or an investor to really get excited if you don't think that this is something that, if they're successful in a year, it's obvious where they're going to go after that. You might not know specifically, but in kind of a generality, you can kind of see a trajectory that makes sense. And so I think the thing, when an entrepreneur, to your question, has a prototype, which means they have kind of a product idea or some concept, they really need to think about how they're going to grow that over time to be something that can scale. And that means scaling not just the product, but the market that it's attacking.
Thanks, Jevon. Sahim, what are your thoughts on how do we take startups to the next step?
I don't know. I don't have much experience running startups, but I follow along all these different startups. But I would think all these actors and places like Volta probably helps. I don't know what you guys think about that, because it seems like the new trend that's happening now when everybody's joining together and sharing their mutual knowledge.
Absolutely. Gerry, what's your thoughts on what do startups need to take to go past actually making a product idea to making a business and scaling them?
Well, I think it's very important to, I don't want to start differentiating early on in the discussion, but you can be very successful as a small niche player in a domestic scene. And I think it's important, maybe what we're already talking about are the ones that are so-called gazelles that are going to go global and are going to hit $100 million to $1 billion worth of revenue in a, let's say, less than 10 year span. if that's what we're talking about, that's a heavy, heavy lift, and there are not that many companies that are going to make that just on sheer numbers alone. I think, though, that we recognize that the objectives of the founder are very important here at the very beginning of the discussion. So there are some very successful companies that are going to be $20, $30 million worth of revenue that are not going to be go into the future or Radiant 6 or Q1 Labs. They're very important for us in our ecosystem, and they're very important for our economy. But the big ones are going to need a lot of help, and that's going to, and some breaks. I think they're going to need very successful and important venture capital support. So it's not just money in that case. They're going to need a reach of the venture capitalists. So it's all the things that are there, and I think we have most of them in Atlantic Canada. We've proven that we have enough to at least get a number of these going, and it's a combination of things. I don't think it's one thing in particular, but I want to emphasize that while hitting a home run with we'll call it a gazelle, those aren't my words, somebody else coined that, but it is one thing and it's very important, but there's also hitting some very successful $20, $30 million startups for the region, and that's equally as successful, in my opinion.
Understood. That kind of leads into my next question. When you were mentioning, I guess, like the gazelle or like the home run, right now we have a major problem where there is just not enough talent in the region to really support multiple gazelles, or let alone just one or two. Where are we going to find the talent to actually get into the region and support these startups, and how are we going to convince them to come to the Maritimes or in the Atlantic region? And I'll have yourself start again with that, Gerry.
Oh, you said Gerry?
Yep, I said Gerry.
Oh, the again part fooled me. Well, look, I don't see dire straits in talent. There may not be enough talent to, let's say, take everyone to their maximum height here, but I don't see that as a particular issue. Just want to get on the record as saying, IT resources and high-quality IT resources are tight throughout the globe. So there isn't a place that has, a whole lot of people hanging out, waiting to be called. Having said that, I think it's going to come from the usual places. Some from our domestic market, from, let's say, kids coming out of school, as the expression goes. Some very bright kids that can hit the job market running and need less development time. And they're there. We know they're there. And Jevon's got some plans to get more of them into the school system, as we all do. We want to see more of them. The expats are going to be the source of some experienced talent that will return, and we've seen evidence of this. Radiant 6 had many of the people that did come forward were former iMagic TV executives for part of the senior team, but the chief marketing officer was an expat called Chris Ramsey. Well, they still call Chris Ramsey, I guess. And so one or two expats with a lot of experience can carry a lot of weight. And then, of course, the immigrants. I think we're doing a very poor job on immigrants, and that's the one that we've got to improve. And I see that as just a lot of hard work and taking immigrants a lot more seriously than we have in our communities. So
yeah,
I'm not worried about lack of talent. Talent finds opportunity, and we just have to show them we've got a world-class company. They'll come here. In my opinion, I don't want to be arrogant about it, but I'm not worried about it.
Gotcha. Jevon.
Yeah, I think Gerry hit on a couple important points. Skilled immigrant labor is obviously needs to be a bigger priority in the region, and we've seen a lot of efforts around attracting immigrant investors, but not nearly as much focus around here attracting skilled immigrants to existing opportunities that we have. But my sense is that that's going to continue to be pretty difficult for the region whenever we get compared on a tax basis and on an opportunities basis with other parts of Canada. I think traditionally we've had a tough time with that. and it's definitely a heavy lift, as Gerry says. And the other piece to the talent puzzle, as I see it, is really focusing on developing, call it what you want, the locals or the domestic talent. I think it's obvious to me that we have the brain power here. I think a lot of it is being kind of shipped off, and that's really a tradition for this region, to kind of send off a lot of our labor and brain talent, and we're seeing that right now with the oil patch in Alberta. It's just kind of decimating what could be a highly productive local skill set if they were educated properly. And that's what I'm focused on right now with a lot of my thinking, and a lot of the effort that I'm putting in personally is around trying to get coding as a skill that's introduced in the public school system. And that's really with a view of trying to think about, Gerry mentioned, okay, how are we going to build scaled companies in the next 10 years? And I think as we kind of look at the next 10 years and the next 20 years, we really have to put a lot of energy into developing capabilities here to turn kids into developers, kids that want to pursue that career path, and to give kids who want to pursue other career paths, whether it's management, whether it's medicine, whatever it is, science, anything, the ability to apply coding in their professional life, because we also need to increase the productivity levels in the region across every sector. It doesn't matter if it's public or private or what part of the private sector it is. We lag on productivity, and we need to increase that. And I feel pretty strongly that giving kids coding as a skill set that they can apply would be very positive in that for that. But like a lot of things, it's not simple. There's not one single solution. Skilled immigrants aren't going to arrive on our doorstep the way they do here, the way they do in other parts of the country, at least not for quite a while. And it's going to take a long time to develop capabilities with teaching kids to code. So in the short term, I think Gerry has a good point. I don't see the shortage, and I'm someone who's hired quite a few people in the region. Gerry has played a big role in helping scale a few of the tech companies who've truly managed to scale here. And I think the Radian 6 approach is probably the most pragmatic one I've seen, which is that they really established offices in different parts of the region to focus on certain strengths, right? In Halifax, they had sales and marketing. In Fredericton, there was a lot of R&D, and in St. John, a lot of R&D, and as well as kind of back office services, and I think there was sales and marketing there as well. But that, for me, when I moved here, was really fascinating to see the approach that Radian 6 had taken. So I think, like Gerry, I would go on the record as someone who's hired some folks here the same way Gerry has played a role in hiring folks here, and I would say I haven't seen the crunch. I think there's an argument that we need to get ahead of it, and we need to be smart about how we make sure that the startups down the line in Atlantic Canada aren't crunched to any higher degree than any startup in the tech sector anywhere, which you don't have to go far to talk to an entrepreneur about how hard it can be to hire talent. And I would say at this point, we may be close to even having an advantage in terms of the access we have to engineering and software development talent compared to other places.
Excellent. Sahim, do you have any thoughts on the following topic?
Yeah, definitely. I am actually an immigrant here, and pretty much everybody I went to school with that is not originally from around here have left. There's very few of us that have stuck around, and I had no intention of staying until I started working for Chalk. But the reality was I had no idea about any of the companies that were around. It was very hidden. Nobody really talked about it. And I think things have changed now with the Radian 6 and Go Instant and Human Labs, Chalk, everything else. And I think the key there is if immigrant talent, the university systems here are quite good. People come here for the universities, and those are the people to attract. And just getting them more informed is probably the key, and it was for me myself personally.
Excellent. That's cool. All right, so this is going to lead. That actually kind of leads into my next question. Jevon, you were actually talking about the Radian 6 approach. where they set up multiple offices in different parts of the region. But another thing that Radiant 6 did as well was they spent a lot of time in the air. They were always constantly having that connection to the valley. Do you think for companies in the region to be a home run, they need to have those connections to the valley?
I think it really depends on the market you're serving. For example, if you're really focused on media, you're probably going to spend a lot of time in New York, right? And if you're selling to brands, you'd be shocked at how much time you spend in Atlanta and Charlotte and Chicago, the suburbs of Chicago, because that's where the customers are. There's a lot of Fortune 500 companies in Minneapolis, and you end up there a lot. And so I think you can get caught thinking that getting integrated into the valley is going to, depending on your market, you can get stuck thinking that that's going to be a catch-all, and it's really not the case. Now, I think there's a couple of things that are amazing for new entrepreneurs to experience, and this is why I always encourage them to get out to the valley. And a big one is just this pay-it-forward attitude that you see so much. And I've seen it recently. A couple of Volta entrepreneurs went out and spent some time in San Francisco and came back just kind of floored with the caliber and the quantity of the meetings they had because they had one interesting coffee meeting and it went well, and that turned into a handful of other meetings which turned into more, and they were able to make really amazing connections for their business, both with customers and potential customers and with they're raising a round, so with potential financiers. So it's definitely worth it. You can learn a ton. Is it going to be the determinant of how successful your business is? Probably not. I mean, it's totally possible that that's where your customers are, but the Valley is an amazing place as a tech entrepreneur to be and to be immersed in, but the world's a really big place, and there's a lot of customers and a lot of users out there, and you're going to want to get out and talk to them as well, because that's where a lot of your growth is probably going to come from. So early first-time entrepreneurs, I always tell them, get out there, get your butt out there, spend a ton of time, soak it in. But then as you're building your business, you need to be pragmatic, and you need to go where the customers are.
Excellent. Gerry, what is your comments on, for a home run or a gazelle in your case, to be successful, to have a very successful company? Do they need to have those connections to the valley within the region here?
Well, they don't hurt, and it depends, again, on what stage you're at and what business you're in. If you're in the ICT business, as most of our companies are, and my experience is, the Valley is the heart of the world's IT sector, right? So there are a lot of talented people there, and there's a lot of capital that understands the ICT sector. Now, they may understand the green tech sector and the ed tech sector, etc., but their specialty would be IT, I think. So you have to be connected in either early stage, like getting seed capital, or later on, in the case of mentoring or building relationships that help you. But they don't represent the market. As Jevon has said, the market is the globe. So you're not going to sell a lot of Chinese companies in San Francisco. Well, you might sell one or two that have roots there, but you know what I'm saying? So you got to go to Beijing or Shanghai or whatever. So I think global marketing is well done, executed by the Valley companies. They've been very good at that. So they have all these skill sets, but they don't represent the marketplace, really, and unless you're selling into a Google or whatever, like a specialized application that might be useful for the bigger companies that hang out in the Valley. So I think it's a bit like a good diet. Eating well requires you shop at, I guess, your local supermarket and your local market, your local supplier, and your international suppliers and all that. So you try to have like 365 days of meals without going outside your local area. You get kind of bored after a while, even with our focus on eating local. So you have to, I think, eat the diet that's required for your business. And it moves around, and it changes, and it's not in one place. But if there were a sort of a super place to hang out for a bit, the valley would be it. But you could get carried away with that too.
Gotcha. Sahim, do you have any comments on the following discussion?
I have a question actually. So, to both you and Gerry and Jevon, what would you tell somebody who's trying to get to the valley? Like, what's it? Are there any tricks or any advice?
Well, I would say go see Jevon MacDonald. I went to the valley. I didn't have the intensity that Jevon had, but with QN Labs, Brian Flood and I, who was really the co-founder on the business side, we went to the valley to raise money, and it was a very, very nice place to be. The people were friendly and all. We didn't stay as long as Jevon did. Brian was there for a couple of months, I guess. I was there for a few weeks, and eventually we did get some capital from the valley. But it took over a year of discussion before that happened. So I don't have a lot of experience, and I'm not probably going to go back, other than maybe once in a while I go back to San Francisco for a little work and a little recreation. But my days of plowing through the valley are over. I'm going to send the young guys.
We'll hand that over to Jevon now to give his experience.
Yeah, one is you have to have the right expectations, and by that, I mean a couple of things. One is I often get emails at the very last minute, to be honest, from entrepreneurs who've planned trips to the valley and who want introductions. And that's awesome, but often I don't know enough about you or your business to make a proper introduction. And knowing someone is as simple as a cup of coffee, or seeing them speak, or at an event, or something really simple. But it can be really difficult to kind of just set up a meeting with someone for someone you don't actually know that well. And I think people misunderstand kind of how the social dynamics of something as simple as setting up a meeting works. So often I try, and then I get an email back from the person who I'm trying to get the meeting with, and they'll say, well, are you investing, or have you used the product? What do you think? Or have you worked with this entrepreneur? And often, you say, well, no, I don't know them much better than you do at this point. So after a while, you kind of stop doing that. So really, it gets a lot easier whenever the entrepreneur is out and they're making some connections themselves that you can sort of cross-reference when you make an introduction. So, Robert's out in the valley, dear Mike, Robert's out in the valley. He's met a few of your friends. He was hoping to get a meeting with you. I love his company, love what he's working on, would really, really think you should meet up, or something like that, is a heck of a lot easier than, hey, Robert's going to be in town tomorrow. He's there for a day and a half, and he wants to meet with you for a coffee at 12:30, right? So it's tough. So I think that you need to understand that you actually have to do a lot of the work of the networking yourself, no matter what, no matter how connected your friends are, no matter what your resume is, you really need to do some of the work, a lot of the work yourself. And then the other expectation that I think people kind of get mixed up is that you do need to, Gerry mentioned the amount of time you need to be there. You need to be ready to, if it's important to you to build relationships anywhere, you need to put in the time, and you need to be there and available. The phone and Skype and everything, they do get you really a lot further than you might realize sometimes, but at the end of the day, if it's getting a deal closed, or it's having that first meeting where a first impression is huge, just being there can make a huge difference, and you need to be willing to kind of get out there and do it. And so that often means so this is the kind of the other point that comes in here, which is a lot of entrepreneurs kind of are raising money, and they're raising it, and they're raising it, and it just seems to go on forever because they're not really giving themselves kind of a deadline for a first close or anything like that. So in my mind, I've always thought it's best to kind of do your first trip and then be ready to do a handful of successive trips that keep a really good cadence up, So then by the end of it, if it's a month, if it's 2 months, if it's 3 months, I don't know what it takes, you're able to get a deal closed and move on. And if fundraising is your goal, or if closing a customer deal is your goal, but you can be there, you can get it done, and then you can get back and focus to your business. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs aren't ready to kind of keep the cadence up to get something productive done. And to be totally frank, I saw an entrepreneur this winter who almost had an amazing lead for their seed round. They're based here in Atlanta, Canada, top tier investor, really amazing. And they were asked to do one last meeting with a partner at this firm. The back channel I got was that everything was great. They wanted to do this deal, just needed to have a meeting with the partner. They did a phone call. It totally went off the rails. Just the body language obviously wasn't there. Things didn't go well. And the partner came back and said, I really can't see working with this entrepreneur. I was heartbroken. And he just basically said the call was so awkward. It was so weird. We can try again. Absolutely, if he wants to come out, or we want to do another phone call, but as of right now, it's not going to happen. And the entrepreneur kind of just the air just kind of came out of his sails, and he didn't get them closed on the round. He took a while, got another lead, and that's fine. He's moving on with his business, but you really got to be there to kind of, like in the ninth inning, you've got to be able to show up. And I think mentally you need to be in the place where you can just get on a plane and get it done, if that's your goal. And I think the big question you need to ask yourself is, like, how important is Valley money, for example, in this case? Like, is this something I really want to commit to and do, or am I just kind of playing around with the idea? And I think you need to figure that out, because if you're really committed to it and it's going to make a difference in your business, then it's going to take a commensurate amount of effort. And if you're not serious about it, if you just want to go local or in the region or whatever it is, then that's fine, but just focus on that, get it done, and get back to your business.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That kind of leads into another question that I got. So, as in the Valley, most startups are not successful. The majority of them fail. So, one of the issues that we have right now, we have a bunch of companies which are all kind of spinning up around the region, and they're starting out, and they're at about year 1 or year 2. But what we're probably about to see very soon is a lot of failures. We're going to see a lot of companies kind of stop, or they're not just going to be able to get that next raise, or they're not going to be able to get the funding. There's been a lot of momentum and support for all these companies to get started. What do you think is going to happen within the region when all these companies when we have a couple companies just suddenly stop, or even all of them just suddenly stop? I'll start with you, Gerry.
Oh my gosh, that's a bad scenario you just painted. I personally don't see that. Well, it is true. There are failures go with startups. There's different kinds of failures, and I think if we start to break that down a bit, we say, well, companies that don't make it could be acquired. It's not always companies that are going really well that are acquired. They're often acquired for either patents or people. In fact, there are, I guess, phrases that are around that, acqui-hiring, etc. So as long as there are good people there and there is any amount of intellectual property, the chances that could be sold. So the people, I don't like the word sold people, but you know what I'm saying, they could be scooped up. And if they are scooped up, I don't consider that a failure. It's a change of course, and you couldn't say that it was necessarily a pivot because it's a different company, but in a way it is a pivot. So good intellectual property, good people are going to get picked up, and therefore they won't fail, in quotation marks. The company will fail as a name, it's just a registration. Maybe some shareholders will lose some money. I suspect they will, but they'll get a little bit back on that sale. They won't maybe get their full investment back. So I think if you play out the failure notion, it doesn't look as bad as like 1,000 people laid off one day and our whole startup community flat on its face or other parts of its body. So I think the natural order of things is a bit of Darwinism, and there'll be some that will merge and make a better company. I'm dealing with a few right now. We have some failures in East Valley. They have not left people high and dry. They have left the shareholders, at least temporarily, without any returns. But we're looking at possibly getting some return on that dollar, and along the lines I've just talked about. So the scenario that I see is a thriving community of ups and downs. I call it snakes and ladders. There are some people that will wipe out, and probably deservedly so. They may have been a bit crazy about the whole thing, but to say that we hit some wall of failure and we all slide down the edge of it and we're out of work and we have no hope left, I don't see that scenario at all. I know maybe that's not what you're painting, but
right.
The implications here are that we will have a thriving business with the ups and downs of thriving business. And one should never think that that's a cakewalk, but I don't think that it represents a wall of failure or anything close to that in any kind of negative scenario. And we went through the 2001 double whammy. We had the 2000, sucking up a lot of capital. Everyone had to get ready for the elevators falling through the sky and stuff. And we then had the dot-com bubble burst, back to back with the over provision, if you will, of the year 2000 stuff. And that was probably the hardest 1-2 hit that the industry's ever going to see, at least in my lifetime. And it recovered within 2 years. Like that was when Mariner Partners started, in the middle of that. And that was when iMagic TV revectored, and Mariner Partners picked up 30 people from iMagic TV and built a software that's now just coming into its own. And Mariner's going to have a huge opportunity with that software that's left over from iMagic TV learnings. Not the software, but the learnings from that business. So there you go. It's a kind of I get carried away with this, so I'll shut up.
No, it's all good, Gerry.
I really don't see that kind of outcome with good people and good technology. It's quite the reverse, actually. Just a different name on the door. Gerry Pond works for this company today.
Excellent. Thank you, Gerry. So, Jevon, I'm going to let you continue on with that conversation.
So Gerry's right. And I think if we can build an acqui-hire ecosystem, that would be amazing. And I would love to see that. And it sounds like Gerry has some ideas on how we're going to get these companies bought. So awesome. Let's get these companies that are going sideways. Let's get them folded into other startups in the region. That would be amazing. What I would hate to see would be that a lot of that talent gets poached out of the region by acqui-hires as well. And I'm a little bit fearful. We've got some real potential monsters grow, and I mean monsters in a good way, but growing in Ontario and in BC, and I think they have a real potential to kind of dip in here, really suck some talent out. They don't have to worry about immigration issues or anything like that. They can pull the talent over to their anchor cities, and that would be a bummer. So if we can do that here, acqui-hire ecosystem, that's amazing. I think Gerry's right. There's not a big crash coming, but Robert, I think the question you're getting at, and it's something I've been thinking a little bit about, is kind of what's the perception going to be, right? So, if you've got a couple high flyers, right? So we've had a few of these companies in the last year or two who've raised some funding, and the founders are high-profile folks that they're known in the community here. And then you've got kind of this crop of potential employees, existing startup employees, and then existing or potential startup founders who really haven't seen it before. They don't quite know how it works. They're not quite as grizzled as Gerry on this stuff. So what's their perception going to be? And I think if the community expresses fear or disappointment, that would be a huge mistake. And I think we actually really need to take the opposite stance. And Milan, if I could choose the executive director of Volta, was emailing with me last week, and he's like, we need to, when this happens, which it will, we need to throw parties for these companies, and we should invite every other startup there so they can meet the employees and they can get them reconnected and plugged back in. And so, I've always hated the term celebrate failure because, frankly, failure sucks, and it's okay that it sucks, but at the same time, I think we really need to celebrate these founders and what they've, really attempted, and which maybe hasn't worked out, and that's no big deal. And Gerry can tell you, and I can tell you, like, every time something works, you've had, tons of things under your belt that really haven't worked, and sometimes you just don't talk about them. Sometimes you just move on, and sometimes it's really public, and it's too bad, but the recycling of the talent into the ecosystem, it would be a huge, huge benefit. And whether it's product managers or designers or programmers, there are places for all these people, and we actually, need to spend some time on making sure that we're good at showing these folks opportunities elsewhere in the ecosystem, so that they're not just kind of let to float out there. The last thing you want them doing is applying for jobs in other cities or with kind of some of the big corporates or whatever it is, if you're worried about the ecosystem.
Excellent.
So Robert, it's Gerry. Could I just add something?
Shoot.
Because I think there's another stakeholder group that probably are more fragile than the employees, and that would be the angel investors. As you know, we don't have a large community of angels in Atlantic Canada. And I think we're seeing some evidence that angels are starting to appear because of the successes and just the general hype that's in the marketplace, and maybe to another extent, maybe the poor performance of the public markets. But in any event, if too many of them get burned on their first entry, if you will, like into the angel world, that would have a negative impact. I'm just cautioning that probably that money will dry up a lot faster than we'll lose our talent. So the capital might be the one that's the angel capital, the new angel capital, young angel capital, fairly modest amounts of angel capital, which are very, very much required for the startup world, might be pushed back into the bushes again.
Yeah, if I could add one thing to that, Gerry, the thing that I tell anyone who's thinking of investing in a company, so occasionally someone will say, hey, I'm thinking of investing in this company, what do you think? And the one thing I counsel them all on is to really think about, to the degree it's even possible, to think about kind of a bit of a portfolio approach so that they can mitigate some of that risk a bit across a series of investments. I think anyone who does a single investment, you're just going to lose it. It's just how the data works. It's gone. And so if you're just investing in one company, no matter how awesome they are, no matter how much you like the founders, whatever it is, just kiss it goodbye, let it go. But if you can think about, okay, so maybe you don't have millions to invest, but maybe you have, $20,000 or whatever it is. Well, maybe you can get $4,000 or $5,000 checks in, or if you've got $200,000, maybe you can get a handful of smaller checks into different companies so you can kind of get your feet wet and experience it. And that's key, I think, to mitigating that disillusionment. If we encourage too many folks who aren't ready for it to go too big into single opportunities, then the disillusionment with the tech sector as a place to invest isn't going to take long at all to kind of grow up, and they'll be scared off and they'll put their money somewhere much safer.
Jevon is so wise. That's why East Valley has 30 companies in our midst.
Yeah, East Valley is perfect example.
Excellent. So we're going to move on to the next question here. So we talked about one extreme there, which Gerry kind of highlighted. Jevon, you understood the perception or what the point was that I was trying to get across. But the next point, or the question I'm going to do, is the other extreme. Let's just say we have another company, or we have a company that just explodes. It does way better than anyone's ever expected. When is it okay for that startup to start taking talent from, the upper startups which may be on the edge, or even just the medium startups to make one really big success in the region. Is that okay, or is that not okay, or is there another way to go about it? And I'm going to start with you, Gerry.
Oh my God. Yes, it's okay. Yeah. I don't think you can. There's a certain nature of things here. The natural world. I don't want to get into a David Suzuki kind of discussion, but if you look at the natural order of things, which has been around a lot longer than startups and IT or any other sector of the economy, there's a certain survival of the fittest model. It's referred to, I guess, as Darwinism. So you can't fight survival of the fittest. It defies freedom of speech and a freedom of choice and all those freedoms that we have to organize and all that. So you have to let some course flow that's natural, and I think that's the way the way the jungle is, and the ecosystem reflects a bit of the jungle. Having said that, I don't think that we want to only back one winner, if that's what you're implying there. Sort of like the government says, well, we're all going to invest in RIM or BlackBerry, as it likes to be called today, or Nortel or whatever, and we're all going to put our shoulder to the wheel and the wheel of whatever company it is. That doesn't make any sense to me. So favoritism or oneness from that regard is not something I would hope would happen. But in terms of the region's interest, it is in our interest to have a big honking success that is IPO'd from here, because that's what the world looks at, unfortunately. Size counts. Small people don't get ahead like big people do, and it's just a matter of their stature, for goodness sakes, let alone their competence. So size matters, and I think we should be shooting for $1 billion IPO out of Atlanta, Canada. But that doesn't mean that we all work for that particular company, or that it gobbles up all of our capacity. So we'll have to have some kind of leveler there. But maybe we have 3 companies that are vying for it, and that creates a better competitive model. Then we can really suck up the resources of the world.
Excellent. Jevon, what are your thoughts on what does become a point when we support? What's your thoughts on that comment?
I mean, so yeah, Gerry's got it right. Survival of the fittest is a huge piece of the puzzle. There was an article, I pointed it out to me, showed it to me on their phone at lunch the other day. In all Nova Scotia, there was a local startup who was complaining that they weren't able to hire a single developer, and the software developer, and the reporters, like, the conjecture was like maybe there's a labor talent crunch or whatever in the tech sector. But in the meantime, I'm watching some startups who are hiring, a dozen folks in a very short period of time, and it really comes down to how much they value recruiting and how much they value their ability to recruit, because it's your ability to hire and retain talent is a huge factor in building a successful company over the long term, and it's a skill you need to develop. You need to pay attention to it. You need to get better at it, and so we need to help in the local startup ecosystem. We need to help create better recruiters and folks who are better at retaining their employees, and in that process, you're going to have a lot of startups who are going to poach a lot of folks from other startups, and it's totally how the game goes, and you better be ready for it, and you better be able to defend yourself by being an awesome employer. I mean, there's really no other way to do it, right? Because most recruiting is done through referrals by your own employees, and you need to be an awesome employer who your employees want their friends and other talented folks to work at. So it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time, and if you're not good at it as a founder, you need to recruit someone yourself very early on who's very, very talented with that, so that they can really help make sure that process is something that's ongoing. But then, and as a kind of a natural function, a really great high-growth startup is going to be really good at soaking up the talent and dislodging it from crappy employers. And so to Gerry's point, I don't think we have to explicitly back anyone. I think the high growth companies are going to find a way to attract the talent, whether it's already here in the region or whether they need to bring it in from elsewhere. And it's just a function of being a highly skilled entrepreneur. You're going to get out there and you're going to recruit these folks wherever they are, even if it's the startup next door, because you got to do it.
Excellent. So, hey, do you have any comments on the discussion? All right.
No, not really, but I think like they said, like I don't think you can really stop someone as an employee to go to another company.
Okay. Thank you, Zahim. All right, so we're leading on to we're finalizing. We got about 2-3 more last questions here. One of the things I'm going to ask for you to start on this discussion, Jevon, is since you have more of a foot in the door per se with it, is there's been we've seen a lot more excitement around accelerators, startup houses, and co-working spaces within the Maritimes recently in Atlantic Canada. Now, there's Volta, there's Common Grounds in Newfoundland, and we have MLab and Accelerate here in Fredericton. Is there a problem with having too many within the Atlantic region? Is there something we should be worried about there, or is it more the merrier, and let's just see what can happen? Jevon.
Yeah, I don't think there's a problem. I think my attitude with this is always, who's actually doing it? So it's funny, there were 4 or 5 different incubators, accelerators, things that were supposed to happen in Halifax this summer, and there's only been one, and I think I've heard about a lot of incubators and accelerators, and Launch 36 is the one we've really seen take off, and there's been a lot of focus there, and then some of these other ones, it's they're going to happen soon, or they're happening. That's great. I think the more the merrier, and let's it's just like startups. Let's shake them out. Let's make sure that they're producing results. The thing I've always since it started, the thing I've loved about Launch 36 is just it's been super transparent about who's been through, what the status of the companies are, and what they're planning on doing next year. And with Volta, we're trying to do a similar thing, which is really to kind of just be as transparent as possible about how we're operating and what kind of results are getting produced from all the effort going into it. And I hope Volta will get its feet held to the fire, and Launch 36 will, and all these other ones will, because I think the community should demand some certain level of quality. I really think we should demand a certain level of quality from all these efforts. We shouldn't just accept that because you started the latest accelerator in whatever town that you deserve or you should be the go-to person for that. I think there should be some level of real expectation around quality and values and all the things that matter to the community. But the caveat there is the best way to do that is probably just to encourage all these to flourish and to see which ones really shake out in the end. And I think there's some risks in there because I think a lot of them look to the same places for funding and financing, and I think we need to be careful about not backing things for eternity just because they were the first ones in the door. And I don't know on that part, I don't know what the solution is there, but I think it's definitely something as a community we need to be cognizant of for sure.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Gerry, what are your comments on, do we have too many accelerators starting up, or more to merrier?
Well, I would be on the page of the more the merrier, because the market will determine how many are needed. Right now, I've been involved with a startup of what is called Launch 36, which is really a program name. The accelerator is Propel ICT, that's the organization, and it's close to 9 years old, and we've been through a couple of different models of that. So we're into a regional model now with a virtual approach. In other words, no buildings and space. We have to rent space if we need something for people. So the program is really mentoring and accelerated mentoring and high intensity learning, peer to peer. Not a secret. There's a bunch of them out there that do that. So it took us a while to get it right, and we blew through probably $600,000 worth of sponsorships in that process as well. Most of it, well, it was about split 50-50 between the public and the private sector. And now it's 100% private sector. I suppose I better be careful because a couple of universities are there and they're publicly funded, so it's not 100%, but it's pretty close. So in terms of the new ones, like the two in Fredericton, I guess that's great because they're probably going to serve the early stage market. I think Propel or Launch 36 and Volt are probably going to move a little bit further along to the mid-stage market. It's still early, but what I'm saying is some of these people that are going to go into some of these accelerators are still in day jobs. And that's okay. You know, we've accepted a few like that as well. But ideally, we'd like somebody who's committed to their company before they come into the accelerator and not after they leave. So, you know, we're all trying to find the right niche, and there's enough capacity, i.e. clients, if you will, in Atlantic Canada for sure, which is one of the reasons why we took a regional approach at Propel. It started St. John and went provincial in New Brunswick, and now it's regional Atlantic, although we haven't technically, I guess, got any applicants or clients in Newfoundland, Labrador. It's just a matter of time, I think, before we have the capacity to do something there. Certainly that's our vision, and that may require us to, you know, to gear up and look for more sponsorship funds that are maybe not there, to Jevon's point. We might run out of money here. If so, we just have to scale back to what our capacity is. We're no different than any other startup. We are a startup, in fact. So we'll have to abide by the rules of the marketplace. And that's what the others will have to abide by. And I don't want to see a lot of government subsidization going on. It could be good for a startup, you know, for the first year or two to get them on their feet. Maybe subsidize some of the fixed costs that are not going to grow. But to subsidize the operating costs, I would be nervous about that. But you know, we live in a mixed economy, so we have to be careful about that, you know, passing judgment on you know, subsidization. But I would say for now we don't have enough, okay? And at some point we may have too many. There are some that are arguing today that the world has too many startups, accelerators, I'm sorry. So again, I suppose it's feast and famine. There's always somebody worrying about something. That's not what I'm worrying about, too many accelerators in Atlantic Canada. In fact, you know, East Valley Ventures is actually an accelerator. We don't like to say that because then people will think we're some kind of an animal they don't want to deal with. So we stay in the weeds and we call ourselves a venture firm, whatever the hell that is, right? But we're really an accelerator.
Excellent.
So we even fooled you, Robert, with your investigative reporting.
I don't know how investigative reporting, much reporting I've been doing.
But it is actually what we do. We accelerate companies.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. So my next question is, I'm just going to start narrowing it down here, is also with all the excitement that we're having around startups, there's always seems to be a group or individuals who are trying to prey on the vulnerable. So how do we stop this? And I'm going to start with Jevon.
Did you say prey on the vulnerable?
I did say prey on the vulnerable.
Yeah, I think there's this idea of community, and I think it's real actually. Like, it might sound a bit nebulous, but this idea that there's a group of people who look out for each other, pool their resources, and really try and co-develop. To me, that's a very real thing, and it's something we're getting. You know, I'm really seeing it evolve here, and I think, you know, specifically in Fredericton, there's a really tight community of folks, and I think they're getting tighter, and you know, these are things that take years to develop, and And in Halifax, you're seeing that, and I think you're seeing it in other places as well. And that idea of community is really where, like, the antibodies for these folks can develop. And I think over time a triaging system, or I don't know what to call it, kind of starts to fire up, where folks who maybe aren't, maybe have poor motives, or aren't, the right people to be getting introduced to very early stage young entrepreneurs and startups, they'll get moved out and cycled out. And I think we're developing that. I feel really good about it. There's been a couple kind of very public things that have happened, and I think those are probably outliers in general to how things need to operate going forward. I mean, you don't want wars going on and things like that. What you do want is a community that's able to identify people who add value and to reward those people and to include those people in what's happening. And that just takes time, and it's kind of something that evolves, and I'm hoping that that'll continue to be the case here, rather than the kind of awkward, ostracization of folks, because that's not really sustainable over the long term.
Great. Gerry, what are your comments?
Well, I'll keep it quite short because I got rambling the last time. I would say every ecosystem will squeeze out the undesirables, either because somebody will eat them up or they'll get consumed by their own greed.
Gotcha. Sahim, we were just talking about making sure that any groups who are preying on vulnerable or trying to take advantage of young startups and entrepreneurs. What are your comments on that?
Unfortunately, I missed the answers from Jevon and Gerry, but I was curious. What would you guys do? Like, is it okay to call them out, or do you think it'll just naturally get taken care of in a small area like the Maritimes?
That's a different question than what Robert asked. But I personally, I do think it's okay to call folks out. I think it's healthy, because I think information is the most important thing. People who have all the information can make smart decisions, and I think that if you provide them with everything they need, smart entrepreneurs can make really smart decisions. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I do think it's okay to call folks out, and I think it's good for everybody. You just need to be right.
Gerry, do you have any comments on Sahim's question there?
Oh yeah, I agree. There's a role for Coloraders.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I would say, I was trying to stay, again, I'm you can tell I like the natural sciences and the study of how we got to where we're at in terms of civilization. So the ecosystems have methods of dealing with undesirables. And it could be a call out, it could be ignoring them. Like just actually ignoring them, which I feel once in a while people ignoring me. So, there's different ways of dealing with non-compliance, or greed is another thing that has a way of getting leveled, over time. So people get too greedy and they make silly mistakes, and people start to stop cooperating with them, and then they fall on their own weight. So might not be as fast as calling them out, but I'm, I guess, a firm believer that things get, if the community is strong, and the community is getting stronger, to Jevon's point, like maritime-wide or region-wide, that people are looking out after one another. This is the sign of a healthy community, not the sign of a weak community. It's a sign of interdependence, not independence. Interdependence is even more difficult, as you know, in this hierarchy of needs. So we build an interdependent, community-minded ecosystem. It's the strongest thing. It's the fabric is going to be very hard to knock over, and generally speaking, we'll look after the bad apples ourselves, calling them out or just kicking them out. I like kicking them out myself. We just stop funding them. if they're a startup, right? There's ways of doing this. They won't get any money.
So
That'll dry it up pretty fast.
absolutely.
A boycott on startups. Imagine that.
No. Let's not do that. That's a bad idea.
No, certain startups. I'm just saying there's methodologies here.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to propose that. That would be something that one of the younger, more successful entrepreneurs will propose.
Yeah. So you guys both have your individual passions. So this is the part where I'm gonna just get you each kind of to talk about your own views and how this is going to be done. And I'm going to start with Jevon here. You're very passionate about getting coding in the education system and teaching it to kids. How's that going to occur, and how are we going to do that when so many programs are already being dropped from education systems?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple ways to approach the discussion when it comes to education now, and I wouldn't pretend to be experienced with it or particularly successful, but I do know one thing, and I think there's a clear economic argument for why we need to really pragmatically focus on getting coding into schools. And I think that the biggest trend we're seeing is an out-migration of working age young people, and primarily males at this point, leaving the region. And there's a huge gap that's developing, and it's going to continue to accelerate, right? As social norms develop around fathers and young people who've just received their degree picking up and moving away, the pace is going to accelerate. And I think if you think kind of decades ahead, the pain we're going to feel as a region for this kind of ongoing out-migration of talented young people, and not even just young people, talented folks of every age, is really, really, really going to start to hurt. So we need to think about, on a macro level, where do we believe the world economy is moving? How are we going to generate more GDP here? And I don't think actually a lot of thought has been put into that, frankly. I think we look a lot at what the trends are or what the resources we have available now are, and we look at how we can impact our economic growth in the short term. And I think we need to look at kind of some of the macro trends. One that I would propose is very real is that technology is driving more and more of the world's economy, right? It's how more wealth is being generated in terms of the rate that it's increasing than I think any other industry, except maybe finance, but even that is driven primarily by programmers and tech at this point. So we really need to think about, okay, if we're going to give these young boys and girls, and to be honest, I think young girls are a giant part of this because we're not creating a lot of options for them. So how do we create options for our young boys and girls? The number one way that I can think of is to equip them to be entrepreneurs. And the number one industry, if you had to pick a place right now for growth, whether it's as an entrepreneur or whether it's as an employee who works for someone who's an entrepreneur, I think it's in tech. And you can look at me and you can say, well, he's in tech, of course he thinks that. But I think if you take a really objective point of view, it's one of the few places that we have the resource that's ready to go and is real, and that's people. And I really am convinced we have some very smart kids here that we could serve much, much, much better by tailoring their education and giving them the option. And that's the biggest difference. Right now, we're not giving these kids the option, period. They do not get the option to enter technology as a career. They can create the option for themselves later in their life, but at that point, once people have left high school, most of them have kind of decided on their career trajectory. And so I just think about how many brilliant minds we've sent out to the oil patch. It drives me nuts to think about it. And I've experienced it firsthand. with so many of my friends from high school. I think at one point I went on Facebook and I counted, and it was something crazy. It was like 30+% of those I went to high school with were working out west in Alberta. It's not that they have bad lives. It's not that they're all, like hauling wire across a mud field in northern Alberta. A lot of them are in marketing and they're in the back office and things like that. But they're not building families here in Atlantic Canada. And that's something I'm personally passionate about, is how do we help people build families that stay here and grow here? Because I think we've got an amazing community in the region, and I'm not talking about the tech community. I'm talking about this region is an amazing community. It's an amalgamation of communities, and as a whole, it's an amazing one. But we have a huge systematic risk in the next 2 decades, which is that fathers and brothers and mentors and teachers and everyone else are leaving, and the social fabric becomes really vulnerable, I think, at that point. And I think we need to make really tough decisions, and we need to place long-term bets. The one that I'm out there in this very long-winded way pleading for at this point is, let's teach kids to code, because it's a really practical skill that they can apply, not just in tech, but in every business. The best chemists, the best physicists, the best mathematicians, the best financial analysts, the best teachers, the best lawyers, like the best people in almost every field today have some experience in coding, and we need to just take advantage of that fact. Sorry about that. That was very long-winded.
Awesome. Gerry, share your passion.
Well, I think
you have to say with that as well.
I think we have the same end state, the same vision, Jevon and I, and a whole lot of others, including, I'm sure, yourselves. But, the big vision is to see the region lead again, economically speaking, and it's been a while since we've done that. So I guess in order to get back on top, as they say, I support what Jevon is saying 100%, that we need essentially opportunities for our youth, and he's got the approach, and I won't repeat all of that. I think there's another dimension to this, though. Certainly in the short term. The short term maybe is in, I guess, economic terms, maybe long term. It will take us a while for that, stay at home and code thing to work, right? And in the meantime, I think an important part of strengthening our competency, our intellectual skills, and our capacity to do stuff would involve what is referred to as brain circulation. So we're talking about brain retention with this model of keeping kids here that graduate from here. And, that's a family thing. It's important, and we can see the benefits of that. There's also the notion of brain circulation that says you can learn a lot by moving out of here and then working from somewhere else for here. East Coast Connected, which is an organization that was formed probably 10 years ago now, has that notion, and I subscribe to it immensely. So it involves harnessing the expat community as potential returnees, which we've talked about in terms of filling jobs. It also says we can harness them where they are. They can be part of our, shall we say, extended community and contribute, economically speaking. They can contribute capital for sure, because it flows very easily, and our capital incentives could be geared to that. They aren't today, but they could be. So we could be a lot smarter about raising capital from expats that are located in all parts of the world. So take advantage of the exodus of the last 50 years and connect with them, but not necessarily to move them back, to keep them, shall we say, in place and working in different ways. They could work for us there. Our chief architect of Mariner Partners is in Calgary and has been for the last 8 years. Some days it's a problem, but most days it isn't. So they can work for us outside the region as well. I think the main thing for us is to remain leadership, in a leadership position, not in the steerage class. So to become leaders, that's what we need. Is we need the headquarters here, not all the employees here. We need the brains at the top, if you will, to stay here and run their businesses from here, and with some of their senior people perhaps in other parts of the world. So we need a distributed model, taking advantage of the people that have left as well as those that maybe shouldn't leave to get work, which can address the points that Jevon is making. So we need a dual strategy here, not just one. I might point out that I'm a reverse pat. You've never heard of a reverse pat, have you? I just coined it. That's the son or daughter of an expat. So I returned to the province. My parents left to find work. My father, from the Miramichi River, which where we all know is the best river in the world for salmon. Anyway, he left to find work in the woods in Quebec. And I was born there and grew up there, and I returned to university and stayed. So I'm a reverse pat. So I'm a product of what I'm talking about, is that maybe you lose the first gen, but you get the second and third. It's not lost until it's totally lost. So it's probably going to take 3 generations before we totally lose them. And they have no connections at all from here. And then we'll just have to call them migrants.
Excellent. Sahim, do you have any comments?
No, but the whole hangout has been pretty fascinating.
Excellent. So I'm going to second last question. I just want to make sure that we all get a chance to discuss our passions. And one of your biggest passions right now, Gerry, is making a regional push. So trying to get all the different provinces to work together. How are you going to, how is that going to be accomplished? What's your vision for that? How do you think we can do that?
I'm going to climb from the highest flagpole and declare it done. How am I going to do that? Well, I guess I'm going to have to find some people that share that view, and there seem to be quite a few that says, I don't want to get carried away in economics here, but there are a couple of theories in economics that do apply. One is the theory of critical mass, which says you need a certain amount of something to make something, whether it's a sculpture or what it is. So you need a critical mass of a block of granite to carve a certain size of sculpture. Well, the same thing I think applies to an ecosystem that supports the growth of an industry, like the IT sector, let's say, like we've been talking about. So critical mass looks to be around 2 or 3 universities and 2 million people. And interestingly enough, the Maritimes exceeds that in universities, although, to be fair, a lot of them are quite small, but we have, well, if you count Memorial, I guess, and we should, say Atlantic Canada, we have 3 universities that would be considered, full discipline universities with R&D capacity. And we have some excellent schools with more than, say, 1 or 2 faculties. But so I think we have collectively what it takes on a regional basis to form a critical mass. And I won't go through all the other factors here, transportation infrastructure, and all the things that make modern cities and modern regions hum. We're too distributed in the model we have, and we're never going to amalgamate. And amalgamation is probably going to cost more tribal activity than you can imagine. So I look at this and say we need to have a community-minded model that says we're going to be a federated ecosystem, and we're going to grow on our strengths collectively, and we're going to use our collective critical mass to market to the world, to market to ourselves as well, and to look at, when we go looking for people, let's say immigrants as an example, we do that on a regional basis, like the cruise ship industries looking for cruise ships, or the other industries around us looking for markets. They're too small, like in agriculture or fisheries, to go to the Boston market in fisheries and, one company or one group of companies. So we've got to use critical mass to our advantage, not to our disadvantage. And there's a smart way to do that, and I think it's probably its time has come. And the people that I've talked to about this, not my generation, by the way, because they're still a bit tribal, but younger people recognize that collaboration is a stronger strength than competition in many cases. So co-opetition or something like that. We can still compete. We can still be somewhat rival in what we do, but in the big picture, we're going to look like one. So that's the vision I've got. And I haven't put a name on it yet, but I'll have to find one pretty soon to make a cool name out of it. Maybe you can have a contest on that.
Gerryania or something.
What's that?
We can call the region Gerryania or something.
Geriania.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like geriatrics.
It's getting close.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, that's it's more than it's Jerryland. Yeah. But anyway, that's it. That's just the beginning. I could go on for quite a while on that one. There are
Gotcha.
quite a few principles of economics that are staring us in the face that we've got to smarten up and take advantage of. We've got we've got the capacity. We're just defusing it.
It's interesting. I was talking to a Moncton entrepreneur the other day who was complaining he didn't feel like there was enough startup activity in Moncton and enough going on, and well, I didn't think that was true because I think there's a lot of awesome stuff happening there, and I also said, like, holy crap, man, like, look at an hour down the road in either direction, look at what's happening in New Brunswick, and like there's a ton going on. It's been really impressive and awesome, and he was kind of like, oh crap, you're right. Like there is a lot going on. It's just it's not like all in my backyard. It's a little bit. Some of it's down the road, but that's all part of the same ecosystem. And it's kind of like interesting to see how zoned in we can get. I walk to work 15 minutes, and I walk past Volta on the way, and like 3 other startups, and that could be my whole startup world, right? But it's not how you compete. It's not how you build a great startup. It's not how you learn from the best. And I think as a region, like Gerry's pointing out something that's pretty obvious, and we need to get better at it, both city to city and kind of as a region as a whole. And then there's like, I think that's my view on a lot of things, which is like we need to cooperate better within the region. There's a whole political discussion there that we won't get into, but we can lead and be very practical and pragmatic in the tech sector and do some awesome stuff. And like Radian 6, it's like every town in New Brunswick would likes to claim the success, but like that was like 3 different, I think it was 3, right, Gerry? 3 different offices.
3. Yeah.
Like that, you can talk to anyone in the company, and they were all a huge part of the success. And so it was truly a regional success story. And I think the next company that scales to that size is going to have to take a similar playbook, and we should improve on it. And I think it's awesome that Gerry, who had so much experience with that, is really spearheading the kind of education piece. And then the reason that's important, and I call it the education piece, is just because ignorance is like usually what's at play, to be frank. It's like people don't get in their car and go. And so I think that kind of educating people on what's happening. You guys are doing an awesome job with Startup Kitchen. I hope you do more of it. And I hope you guys think about, Robert, you and I have talked about this, how to produce more content that is really connected to all the towns and cities in the region to help knit them together. I think Startup Kitchen has a huge potential role to play in that. I hope you guys find a model that works, and I want to help you with that. I'm sure Gerry wants to help you with that as well. And I think that cohesive voice. We also have Entrevestor, which I know Peter's working really hard on being regional, and he's done a really, really good job of that. So those are all little pieces of the puzzle, and I think that it's going to work. It's also one of those things that's like, it's hard to be a thing. Like, when are you done? Like, where did you start? Like, how are you making progress or not? And I think that someone like Gerry, hopefully keeping everyone honest about it will help us check progress as we go, for sure.
Excellent. So we're just going to finish off there. I'm just going to put my 2 cents in about that conversation, then ask Haim. Is definitely, like, I totally agree about the regional push, because I'm not from New Brunswick. I live in Fredericton now, but I'm originally from a small town out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. Go to the end of the world and take a left, and that's my house. So you'll see it right there. It's a small fishing village called Jador. But the whole idea, like, I see all of us, Maritimers, hence of our website's name, Startup Kitchen, like, I think we just all got into a kitchen party or something and like figured it out, we'd be a lot better off. Like when you put us all in the same room, we're happy to talk to each other, but as soon as you start seeing another city have more success than the other one, they love to compete about it or something. And it makes no sense to me, but hopefully that will change over time.
Yeah, I'll be totally frank. Like competing with each other internally, like it's good to be a bit competitive, but it's not going to move the needle. Sorry to bust in on your piece, but like
no, go for it.
It's not going to, like, you know, Fredericton competing with Moncton or Sydney competing with St. John or Halifax or whatever. It just no one cares, like, outside of here at all. They don't give a shit. They see Atlantic Canada, they see companies, and whether it's Radian 6 or whether it's Q1 or whether it's the next whatever it is, like they just see it happening here, and there's a great vibe. And to the degree we compete, like to any degree that matters, we're just wasting energy and time. Like, you know, let's get on with it. That's why at Volta, like Launch 36, we're like, we want those, like them using Volta as much as possible, because it's just like we think it's the best of breed program, and we think it's going to benefit the folks at Volta, and we should, you know, it doesn't matter where it's based, and the fact that, you know, if people need to get in their car, if it's the best program for you, get your butt in a car and go to Moncton for the weekly meeting or whatever. Like, just like figure it out, because it's the best option you have, and hopefully we can see kind of more of that happening. So sorry, Robert, but I had to like add that little bit.
You're good. Sahim, what's your comment?
No, it's just thank you guys for the support, because we did this for the same reasons. So I really enjoyed the hangout, like I said earlier.
Great. So one thing that we always like to finalize with is, since you guys do have a lot of advice to give, which you have during this whole thing, and thank you very much for your time. It's been well received, and I hope it is well received by our viewers. Is what advice can you give to entrepreneurs? Well, if you had one piece of final advice you could give them, what would it be? Jevon.
Listen to Gerry.
Yeah, right. I only wish. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I
would say it's never over till it's over. And I didn't invent that one, right? But it's never over till it's over. Don't give up on any front, on anything, until it's over.
Excellent.
The piece of advice I would give is, like, if you want to be successful, whatever your definition of success is, you need to really make it happen yourself. That means like hitting the pavement every day, reaching out to mentors, doing what you need to do in your organization, but like you are the arbiter of your success, and part of that, to Gerry's point, is like not giving up. And I think to the discussion we had earlier around like potential, you know, we may have some companies flaming out or whatever it is, like it's fine, but move on, get on to the next thing, and keep moving. Don't slow down. So it ain't over till it's over in the big picture either.
Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you very, very much for both of you for giving your time to Startup Kitchen, to share your experiences, advice, and answer the questions that we had from some viewers and for us, and also sharing your own passions. I wish you both in your own endeavors personally and professionally. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye now.